All right, so we are recording now. Thanks again for that. So we'll go through an intro and then we'll look at your whole class and then we'll dig deeper into a small group section. And like I said, those who need more support, and I'll give you kind of some suggestions for how to look at that data. And then we'll dig even deeper and find maybe an individual student or maybe a couple individual students that really need additional support based on what you're seeing in your Amplify reading data. And then that last part will be prioritizing next steps. So taking a look at all that we've gone through and figuring out what's next. Okay. All right. So my name's Amber McCall. I don't think I said that yet. Sorry about that. I live in Palatine, Illinois. And this is my 13th year in education. So I started out going to Guatemala with no teaching experience. I was actually a chemistry major and I taught physics and chemistry while I was there, as well as English. And then I came back to the States and I changed my major. I got my teaching degree and I taught high school Spanish for a few years. And then I went down to elementary. I was a reading and math RTI specialist. I did bilingual resource, bilingual classroom, and then I was a coach for several years working with bilingual teachers. So now I'm working with Amplify and I absolutely love meeting with educators like you guys all over the country and kind of hearing about what's happening in our early literacy classrooms. So like I said, I'm excited to be here with you this morning and hope you're excited as well. And like I said, this is your session. So as you have questions throughout the session, please ask them. You can either come off mute, feel free to do so, or you can ask them in the chat as well. In our sign-in doc, if you were able to get in there, there is a parking lot tab. So if we have more district-specific questions, we can add those to the parking lot tab, and I'll make sure that that gets back to your administration. So here are our norms for today. So we pretty standard. I'm sure you've been in trainings like this before, but participation is really appreciated. So thank you for those of you who have already participated. In the chat is great, but like I said, feel comfortable to come off mute and share with the group as we're going through some of these discussions. Of course, take care of yourselves. You're all adults, do what you need to do, but stay engaged as much as possible. And then that last one is huge. What is learned here needs to leave here. So this data analysis session, like I said, is a working session and should be really helpful in terms of moving forward through the school year and looking at your data and figuring out how it's going to drive and impact your instruction. Here are our objectives for today. If someone wants to come off mute and read that first one for us, please.
Analyze your student data dashboard to determine strengths, areas of growth for growth and trends.
Thank you.
And prioritize steps for instructional planning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Courtney. I appreciate that. Those are our objectives for today. All right, so for our data analysis process, like I talked about a little bit with the agenda, but we're going to start by reviewing your class data at that high level and look for patterns for the whole group. So what are you seeing as trends? And at this point, you need to keep in mind what you've been teaching in class and see if that's having an impact on your students with an Amplify reading. At that point, we'll look at areas where students have mastered the content and then celebrate those areas because we want to do that, right? That celebration piece is really important. And then we'll also identify skill areas that are presenting trouble spots for potentially multiple students and see if there's a place where you need to kind of dive in and intervene at that point. Next, we'll dive into look at a smaller group of students based on their skill domain analysis and identify one of those skill domains to further analyze to understand what specific content students have mastered, as well as where they need further instruction. We'll then go that layer deeper and analyze a student that you want to learn more about, looking at both the content they've mastered as well as identifying trouble spots that require maybe some additional instructional support. So now that we've reviewed some functionality, we're going to take a look at your teacher dashboard and analyze the data so that you can identify next steps to take with your students. So at this point, if you can all log in to your Amplify reading dashboard, please. I'll give you a second to do that. And if anyone needs help, let me know, but I'm assuming you guys have been in there several times this year, but it's okay if you're not sure how to get there, let me know. someone from the group can help you. I don't know if you guys have a single sign-on that you use, or if you just go to my.amplify.com. Once you are logged in and you're seeing what I see on my screen, so you'll be under your dashboard, that's where you're going to get your actual data. If you can just put your favorite color in the chat so I can kind of gauge where we're at with that, please. Dominica's ready. E. Doyle is ready. Deep dark purple. Love it. That's Jody Miller's favorite color. Have about half of you logged in. Getting closer. Thanks for your patience as we wait for everyone to get where they need to be. In the chat, if you're finished logging in, if you can just put how long your students have been in Amplify reading, so weeks, amount of weeks, or days. If it's just been a couple days, just let me know. Okay, Sarah, so that's totally fine. Just know that you will have less data than some of the teachers that have had their kiddos in for several weeks. So in terms of looking at your data, it might be like thinking through the process, going through it, but knowing that you'll get more information as your kiddos are on the program longer. So I see several of you have had students in there for 5 to 7 weeks, which is great. So you should have a good amount of data to look at today. I don't see any more colors popping in, so I think we're close to everyone being logged in. If you need help getting in, again, please let us know and we'll get you where you need to go. All right, so this is in your participant notebooks on page 4. We're going to take a look at that whole class data again and analyzing overall big picture type stuff. And you'll use your handout to follow along as we go through. You can type right in it, and so it's a great place to take notes. All right, I was just looking at a DM. Okay. So part of the point of the program is that students should be challenged and should have some struggle, right? So no matter where they are in the content, hopefully they're getting to the point where they are struggling on some content and they're successful on some content. The program adapts to where they are, and so it should be giving them both sides of that instructional piece there, right? And so we'll be talking about trouble spots today, but you should use this data in conjunction with other data that you have on your students. Of course, you know that as educators, one piece of data is not the tell all, right? You need to know what's happening in other realms with other assessments and other programs and things that you're doing in your classroom that you have such rich data on your students. So use this data in conjunction with all of those other pieces. But first, we're going to take a look at areas where there are students with no trouble spots. So you'll want to pay attention to see if these areas are areas that you've been instructing in. And if that's the case, awesome, right? That's why students aren't having trouble spots. If not, that's okay. This is just, again, logging in, but I think almost all of us are there. So I'm going to skip over this. Oops, here we go. So I want you guys to, you should have defaulted to your dashboard here. You're then going to click on students, that students tab, and then click on skill view. Okay. So in the live demo, this is a first grade classroom, but that's okay. We're going to go to students and then click on skill view, and you see how it pulls up these colored boxes with the 13 domains within Amplify Reading. Okay, I'm going to kind of switch back and forth between my live demo and my deck just so we can kind of follow along here. So I'm going to model how to complete my analysis using some sample data. You see the sample data on my screen now. Okay, so we're going to zoom in a little closer and take a look at my sample class's overall performance. So I want you guys to take a look at my data right now. Okay. And what skills do you notice that students have worked on and have no trouble spots? Remember that trouble spots are represented by those black circles with a white number. So just put in the chat, do you see any skills where students have no trouble spots? Yeah, so I see vocabulary. Thanks, Cheryl, for that. Letter sound correspondence. Great, Kayla. Any other spots where there's no trouble spots? Yeah, Kelsey, you got it. Key ideas and details. Thanks, Amy. Early decoding as well. Yeah. So in comprehension. So you're seeing if you identified these skills that you see highlighted on my screen, several of you did in the chat. So thank you. We do have a lot to celebrate with my sample students here, right? All of those areas are areas that they're having success in. So that's great. And then based on my sample data, I want you to see I'm going to go back to that screen with the sample data here. Are there any students, there's only 4 on the screen, but which student has no trouble spots?
David.
Yeah, thank you, Christy and Kelsey. Yeah, so we're seeing no trouble spots for David, right? He's on grade level in most of his skills, as well as above grade in comprehension processes. So he's having a lot of success. So that would definitely be an area of celebration for my class as well. Okay, so we see here, David, we would put there, right? He's having success. Okay, so I first looked at the skills and then I looked at the students to see if there were any students that didn't have any trouble spots. So now it's time for you to review your own data and identify areas that you want to celebrate with your class. Okay, so again, in your participant notebook on page 4, this is what you'll see. You can click which domains have no trouble spots, and then you can list the students who have no trouble spots. If there aren't any, that's okay, right? But we want to take a moment to kind of look through and see if there's places to celebrate. So I'm going to give you guys 3 minutes to do so, and then we'll come back together. So go ahead and do that now. Just going to set a 3-minute timer. And if anyone needs help or doesn't have data, can you just let me know in the chat, please? seeing a few messages in the chat about those of you who don't have data. Many of you have special roles, and it sounds like you kind of know where your lane is in terms of Amplify reading, if you're working with teachers that are using it, or if you're supporting students that are using it in mainstream classrooms. It kind of looks a little bit different for each of you. So thank you guys for giving me some feedback on that. Sharonda, are you a classroom teacher? Okay. All right, another question came up as I was looking at my DMs and my messages here in the chat. Have you guys been trained on Amplify reading? Like, did you get the initial training? No. Okay. So that is interesting. So some of the stuff that we did the online training. Okay. What did the online training look like? It wasn't with a trainer, right? I don't know what that is. Okay, we just played with it on our own and figured it out. All right, in videos. Okay, so as we're going through, if you guys have any questions on what Amplify reading actually is, feel free to ask them, because that's kind of an important thing for you guys to know. I'm just going to give you kind of a quick, actually, I'm going to ask you guys, does anyone who's been using it for 7 weeks feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this is what it is, or what I know about it so far, and this is kind of how my students have been using it and they've liked it or not liked it? Does anyone want to or feel comfortable doing that? If not, that's okay. I can give you guys an overview.
I feel like we're just using Amplify right now as a benchmark, the M class and the data. And I think we're starting to learn how to use like the intervention toolkit. But outside of that, I'm not familiar with exactly what else is there to be offered.
Thank you, Christy. Okay, so a couple things. I heard that you guys are using M-Class, which is your benchmark assessments, right? And so you gave assessments to students and you have data for M-Class. Amplify, and then I heard intervention as well, I think. Okay, so you're also using intervention. That is a program specifically for kiddos that typically are in the 10% or below on their M-Class benchmark. It might be a little bit different in your district, but that's typically what we tell districts. And then Amplify reading is a piece that kind of correlates with all of that, okay? So it's a supplemental reading curriculum where students log in and they play through the games. And what happens is Amplify reading takes the M-Class benchmark data and inputs it into Amplify reading. And then your students are placed in Amplify reading based on their benchmark assessment data. Okay. So we got some light bulbs going on. Yay. So based on how students perform on benchmark, they're placed in Amplify reading. And then Amplify reading has an algorithm within it that adjusts based on how students perform. And so it's made up of quests, which are made up of 3 games. Okay. And so each quest is kind of targeted to the skills that students need. And then based on how they perform on each skill, the next quest will either scaffold them to get them closer to where they need to be, or will advance them if they did well on that previous quest. Okay, so the quests adjust as they go through the story. Dominica, how often should they be using Amplify? I think I have mostly grades 3 through 5. Is that correct? So for grades 3 through 5, we say 45 to 60 minutes a week. That's our Amplify recommendation. I don't know if your district has said something different, and if they have, of course, follow what they say. But that's our recommendation in like 15 to 20-minute chunks is good, maybe even up to a half hour. If you have those older kiddos, they can last a little bit longer on Amplify Reading. And some of their activities within Amplify Reading are a little bit longer than we see in the early grades. And so those chunks of time are good for them to kind of get through some of those quests as they go through. Veronica asks, yeah, okay, how do they take the benchmark assessment? And then Kelsey said Dibbles. Yes, M-Class Dibbles. So when I say M-Class, it's Dibbles 8, right, that you're using within M-Class. M-Class is the data platform online where you see all of those assessments and you're giving those assessments digitally. So using M-Class is how I get the reading activities to be lower level for my low students. Sarah, yeah, so they should be placed based on their benchmark. Excuse me. 5th grade doesn't use Dibbles. Interesting. Yes. So good question. Let me go back really quickly to Sarah's question. So using M-Class is how I get the reading activities to be lower level for my low students. So Amplify takes the M-Class benchmark assessment data, unless your kiddos are in 5th grade, we'll talk about that in a second, and then places them. So if they're lower level on some of those skills, they'll be lower level within Amplify Reading, and then it will adjust as they play through the games. If you think, yeah.
Well, I do 5th grade, and I have a student, he's more of a 1st, 2nd grade level.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tried to get him started on it, and it's still starting him too high, and he's just frustrated and pushes it away. But I would love to have him have something that he can do when I'm trying to do the 5th grade core curriculum with the class, where it's working on his reading.
Yeah.
But in keeping him occupied. And it's like, I just don't, and I've looked in it trying to figure out how to get it lower, but I don't know if I can have him do the M-Class if we're 5th grade.
So that's a district question.
Yeah.
But once they log into Amplify, if they don't have M-Class Dibbles data, then it has an automatic placement tool. Did you see him do that at all, where it asks
I did, but, and he just, I mean, he guessed, he just went through push thing. And
yeah,
like when I look at his data on the spreadsheet we were just looking at,
yeah,
see if I can go back to it. I had just gone into M-Class. It just says like he tested out of it or whatever it is when it's higher. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. Sorry.
no, you're okay.
It switched screens. And I kind of assume that was I know he can't do it, like the real low level stuff. I know he can't do it, but I assumed it was because placed out. It says placed out for him, and I just thought because it's already set at 5th grade.
Okay,
Maybe
so
that was why.
if he just guessed through the placement test, then that
Mhm.
probably is why. What you can do is email help@amplify.com. And just explain what you just told me, and they should be able to place him back a little bit for you,
Okay.
so that you can get him kind of in a place which will be helpful and successful for him.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So for 4th and 5th grade, let me expand on that a little bit. Once they log in, they'll see an automatic placement tool, which essentially is like an assessment. It doesn't look like an assessment, but they're going to meet the characters and kind of get a behind the scenes look at the reading lab. And then they have to answer questions to help the characters fix their broken machine. And so it's kind of fun and engaging for them. And then based on their responses to those questions is how they'll be placed on the content map within Amplify Reading. Okay, so if they don't have that M-Class Dibbles assessment data, that's how they'll be placed with that automatic placement tool. Any other questions about that? Thanks, guys, for letting me know, because I want you guys to know what's going on over there. That's helpful, right?
That definitely makes more sense now.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, so for today, what we're looking at is the Amplify Reading data. So when you logged in, hopefully you went to your Amplify Reading dashboard, which those little curiosos, those 3 little monsters, that's the icon you pick. I think that's probably what you guys saw. Is that what you saw when you logged in? Okay, cool. All right. So let's jump back to celebrations. I gave you guys a few minutes. Hopefully you knew where you were supposed to be with that. If not, I can give you a couple more minutes to look through. But did anyone have oops, let me go back here. Did anyone have any celebrations? I saw someone put them in a while ago. Let's see. Dominica said decoding and vocabulary. Awesome. Did anyone else have any celebrations? Any kiddos who didn't have any trouble spots? I know someone said, I don't think they've been using it long enough to have a trouble spot. That could be if they've just experienced content that they were successful with. But that's still something to celebrate, right? Addison says vocabulary is a celebration. Awesome. Have you guys had any training on the dashboard at all? No. Okay. So I do want to show you this Insights tab because this is really helpful. This tab is going to show you how your students are engaging with the program. So I'm actually going to switch and I'll do 4-5 here. Okay. Just so you know, you always have access to this demo, or you should see this demo tab in the top here. If you want to go in and play any of the games, you can do so by clicking this demo, and then you can switch grades and go to the grade band that you want to play. And then when you click launch demo, you'll click student experience and it'll bring you into the games, and then you can play some of those games and see what your students are playing. Okay. But on the Insights tab, you're going to get 4 different pieces of information. So you're going to get your weekly usage for each of your kiddos. How often are they logging in? How many minutes are they logging in? And you can change this time frame to last week if you want to jump back and see what they did the previous week. Okay. This sub-skill mastery newsfeed is my favorite piece because it shows you what sub-skills they have mastered over the last 7 days. So this piece here is kind of a newsfeed. So it will update as students master sub-skills. And so you can hover over where it says 1 student and see which specific student or students, if there's more than one, have mastered those specific skills. And then this graphic here is showing you the percentage of sub-skills year to date for your entire class that have been mastered within the program. Okay, so that's definitely a celebration piece there. And then as I scroll down, the trouble spots is where you're going to see the places that your students are struggling. And so these little info buttons are also going to be helpful for you, especially since you haven't had dashboard training, but this is just going to give you kind of an overview of what you're seeing within each piece of the dashboard. So it tells me here that a trouble spot indicates that a student has unsuccessfully attempted to master a sub-skill 2 or more times. So like I was telling you earlier with the quests that adapt to student performance, so say I have a student that goes through their quest 1, right? Let's take a look here. Hazel, she saw comprehension processes. So she's working on comprehension monitoring in her first quest. She does not do well on it. And so in the second quest, she's going to get an activity that's going to support her with that comprehension. Okay, so kind of a scaffolded activity. And then in the third quest, she's going to revisit that content from the first quest to see if she can do it now that she's been scaffolded. And typically what we see in our research is that once they've seen it that second time, they're able to master it or do much better than they did the first time. If they do not master it, that's when it shows up as a trouble spot. Okay, because Hazel got that 2 times and she didn't master it. Now it's showing up as a trouble spot. She will continue to get exposure to that skill, so you don't have to intervene at that point, okay? But if you want to, you are able to intervene. All right. And then this 4th quadrant here, literacy growth, and works on comprehension. So what this is, every beginning of month, so once a month, students are going to get what is called a skill scan. It's a quick 2 to 5 minute activity. And for grades 3 through 5, what they get is kind of a maze activity. So they're going to go through, read the text, and then fill in the blank based on the answer choices that they have for those words to fill in the blank. And then their responses. So that's separate from their quests. Okay. Their responses to that skill scan are going to show up here. Remember, month over month, because they get it each month. So if students are making typical growth, they'll show up in this area here. If they've made above average growth, you can see them in this category. Or if they've made below average growth, you can see them there. Okay. So again, that's separate from their quest. It's just a quick check once a month that you can see kind of their comprehension piece pulled out from everything else. Any questions on the Insight tab? All right, I think I'm going to continue to go through the dashboard analysis piece because that's going to have you guys look at your data, but you're also going to experience the pieces of the dashboard. So as I introduce each piece, I'll kind of talk you through it and then have you guys look at your data as we go through. Okay. Again, ask questions. You guys have been really good about that so far. So thank you. All right, so on pages 5 and 6 in your participant notebook, you have this information on areas for support. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this piece here. So I want to know if there are students who've been placed below grade level and who those students are. So you can easily tell who has been placed below grade level because as you were looking at the skill view, you probably noticed that those boxes are orange where it says below grade, right? It's important to note that for some students, it's not all skills where they are below grade level. So as I look at my whole class here, hold on, I'm not even showing you guys that. Sorry, here we are. Okay, so here's the sample data again. As I look at my whole class, I would want to list students, even if they are only below grade level in one skill area. Okay, so I'm going to take a look here. I know that this is kind of small. You guys can zoom in on your screens if you're able to, but I'm going to take a look at where I see these orange boxes. So my first student that I see here has all below grade level is Carter, right? So he has lots of areas of need. Thanks, Kelsey, for putting those back in. Appreciate that. Oops. Okay, so Carter definitely has lots of need. And then I also see Ellie has a lot of below grade level skills as well. Okay. All right, and then here, this is what you have in your participant notebook. So you would list the students who have an identified trouble spot in each of the below skill domains or are working below grade level. So you notice that if they have a trouble spot, I'm going to put TS in parentheses next to their name. So like Levi here has a trouble spot in early decoding. And if they're below grade level, I put that asterisk. All right, and that's on page 5. And then it continues on to show you the rest of the domains here. Okay, so these domains across the top should line up to what you have in your teacher dashboard. And then to make sure I know at a high level the domains that need attention, I'll mark off each one and note how many students need support in that domain. So you see for phonological awareness, I highlighted it and then I noted that I had one student that was below grade level. Similarly for letter sounds, highlighted it, I had 2 kiddos. Okay. So now I want you guys to review your own dashboard and use the pages in your participant notebook that Kelsey so graciously put in the chat again if you need it. And I'm going to give you about 10 minutes. And if you guys have questions, please ask them as you go through. But I want you to look at your dashboard. So let me jump here. Okay, so remember, you're going to be on the Students tab and then go to Skill View. And that's where you can see all of those color coding pieces here. So you're going to list the students that are below grade level in each domain. So for this example, I have all of these kiddos that are placed out. So they're not working on those K and 1 skills. So I don't have to worry about those pieces, right? I'll just put NA for that box. But but I would look at advanced decoding. I'm going to move my little toggle here. Advanced decoding, I see that I have Caleb is below grade level. So I would list him and then I put that asterisk next to his name to note that he's below grade level. If I have, for example, Harper in integration of knowledge and ideas, she's below grade level. She also has a trouble spot. Do you remember what I put to mark that?
TS.
Good job, Kelsey. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So take a few minutes to go through your dashboard. If you have data, right? I know several of you don't, but take some time to go through your dashboard and list out those kiddos that are below or have trouble spots in those domains.
Can I ask you a slightly off-topic question?
Sure.
So I have my kids do the vocabulary as well. And sometimes it takes them, I guess most times it takes them right back into reading. Does that make sense?
You're saying vocabulary is separate?
Yes, their dashboard, they can choose reading or vocabulary.
Oh,
And so when they
within Amplify
choose-
reading?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but when they choose vocabulary, it takes them into reading. And then I was like, okay, well then just choose vocabulist as your activity. Does that make sense?
I need to do some research on that. I'm not exactly sure why it's showing up like that because so typically what happens is when they log in, it will bring them right into their quest. So it should be the games that are aligned to the skills, not just necessarily vocabulary. I have not heard of students being able to choose reading or vocabulary. And Veronica says hers is the same way, so it's not just yours. But I haven't heard of that. Interesting.
Okay,
So
thanks.
sorry about that. I will get back to you guys. The reason I collected your emails is so that I can send a follow-up to you. So that'll be one of the things that I follow up on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Kind of just to piggyback off that, Amber. So like I have my little cards. So I have them click on the animals for reading and the eyeball for Amplify vocabulary.
Oh, okay. So the vocabulary piece is not Amplify reading. So that's a separate vocabulary piece that you guys have in your
Okay.
district. So the little guys, the curiosos, that's
Yeah.
Amplify reading.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And then they also
But
have
what I'm,
on ours, they can also
ahead,
click
Kelsey.
this, but then sometimes when they click the eyeball, it takes them back to the curiosos.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you, Kelsey.
Mhm.
E. Doyle, did you have something else?
I was gonna say exactly what she said. It takes them back into reading. So I didn't know if it was worth it to have them click on vocabulary or just stay within reading.
Okay. I'll get some follow-up on that. Veronica, what are the other two buttons? So one's vocabulary, one's reading. What are the other two? Okay.
It's usually M-Class assessment and then CKLA hub.
Okay. Are you guys also getting trained on CKLA today? Do you know? Not sure.
Most
And-
of us already have had CKLA training.
Okay.
Because this is, for me, for my school, this is our second year doing CKLA.
Okay. Good to know. Thanks, Kelsey. I just know some of my team is also training you guys on CKLA. So maybe it's new teachers that haven't had that training.
We haven't had Amplify CKLA training though. So we had CKLA training on like the first edition.
Okay.
So it's definitely different. Yeah.
All right. You guys have a couple more minutes. I'm gonna just ask if you want to kind of explore the student games a little bit, since you guys didn't have that initial training. Can you just put that in the chat? Just put explore so I know if you guys want to do that or not. I love it, Jody. Currently exploring. All right. That will be our next thing then. Thanks for being flexible, guys. Sorry about that. It's the name of the game. Flexibility, right? I don't know what it is, but honestly, like on my end, I was like talking to my team, like we need to make sure that everyone has data and they're ready for this dashboard analysis section. And they've all had training, blah, blah, blah. And I was assured like, yes, 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 yes. Well, that's not the case. And that's totally fine.
I'm sorry. It's kind of embarrassing that we show up this way.
No, don't. It's not your fault at all. Don't worry
Honest with
about
you,
it.
on my end, we were just told to go look through the courses and sign up for something for today. And so I serve second grade and fifth grade, and we're doing CKLA for the first time this year in 3-5. So I thought, oh, let's check out the dashboard. And clearly I've missed some other steps.
All
but
right.
Thank
Well,
you for filling in the gaps for us.
no problem. That's good to know.
I don't
Christy.
know what it's like at other schools, but that's kind of how I got here today.
Good to know. Yeah, Kara says, you're not the only one, Christy. All right. And trust me, like I said, this is not the first time this has happened. It's not just your district either. It happens all the time. It's just as a trainer, like I'm not really involved in the scheduling or the planning or anything like that. So it's like, I need to know what these teachers know and don't know so that I can support them. Yeah. Sarah says at our school we weren't even told about Amplify reading, which is probably why your kiddos haven't been logged in for very long. So
Just curious, Amber, how many trainings are there for Amplify reading? Like, or just, I guess in general, what should we have already known before? Like, what training should we have already had?
well, really just our initial training is like the first one where we talk about like an overview of the program, kind of that nutshell that I just gave you super fast in 3 minutes. So we talk about like all of that, the placement and what students experience. And then we go over the dashboard and talk about all the different data pieces that you'll get and insight into your students' performance. And then we talk about the implementation and like what that looks like in your classroom. Oh, you guys, it's not just you. Don't worry. It's not just GCS. There's just like a lot of stuff going on all the time, right? And so we just need to, like I said, be flexible and appreciate you guys being gracious and willing and so sorry, Jody. All right, so let's take a look at areas of need in your classroom. Does anyone want to share anything that they noticed, maybe patterns that stuck out? Like, I have a lot of kids that are struggling with X, like anything like that.
I have my first big gap is starting at letter combinations, which I kind of had already pegged those kids as ones that needed definitely some extra support of me drilling back down. But then really my biggest group then is at advanced decoding,
Okay.
which makes a lot of sense too, of which kiddos that is.
Good. That's good that you, like I said, using that other data you have on them and then making sure that that makes sense within what you're seeing in Amplify reading. Great. Thanks, Kelsey. Anyone else want to share anything or any questions you have about it?
For the most part, the same kids are across below grade level. So it's very consistent for my class.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, Kara. Yeah. So you have and is that what you're seeing in your classroom as well?
Yes, these are the exact ones.
All right. Awesome. Amy says, yes, advanced decoding is where the big problems begin. All right. Well, thank you guys for sharing. Okay. So, and Cheryl agrees. We're going to make a pivot here and I'm going to have you guys actually log, you're already in. So what you're going to do, let me get my screen up here. Here we go. So like I said, you guys should all, even if you're not a classroom teacher, and if you have your own login, you should have a demo up here. So click that demo and then click the grade level band that you want to start with, either 2, 3, or 4, 5, I'm assuming for most of you. I'm going to start with 2, 3, and then I'll also show you 4, 5 because it looks different. So that's part of what we talk about in initial training. One of my favorite parts about Amplify reading is not only is it adapting to students' needs, but it also is differentiated based on the motivations and things that get kiddos excited at each grade level band. So the 4th and 5th grade world looks different than the K1 and 2, 3 worlds. There's a lot more to click on, a lot more engagement pieces for 4th and 5th grade because their attention spans are longer and developmentally they're at that point, right? So like I said, I'll start with 2, 3, and then you're going to click launch demo and it will just bring you to a demo dashboard for grade 3. But then to get to the student experience, I'm going to click on student experience. And I want you guys to just pause on your screen right now. Don't click play yet. I'll let you go play in a moment. I'm going to click play here. And then you see this little curioso bouncing up and down. Okay, that's how I get to my games. So when I click on that, turn my volume down a little bit. I don't know if you guys can hear my sound or not. Can you? Okay, so I'm at the games here. I want you guys for this one to play. Actually, you can play any of them, but unmask that is typically the one that we play in training. So when you're in the 2, 3 band, you're gonna play unmask that. And then I'm gonna go back with that back arrow. And then Jody says hers doesn't look like that. Did you go into 4, 5? Because then it won't look like this. It will, this is for K1 and 2, 3. It looks like this. Okay. In here too, in these 3 vertical dots, when you click on those and click on the practice tab, it gives you access to all of the games that the students have access to. So if you want to come in and choose, a lot of you said you're struggling with advanced decoding, your kiddos are, so you can come to advanced decoding and see the games that are available to them in advanced decoding. Okay. This tab here, the practice tab, is off by default. And if you want to turn it on for your kiddos, you can. For example, like a lot of teachers say it's Friday, like once you play through your quests and you finish your quest game, you can go to the practice tab and choose a game you want to play. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just leave it off and they only will have access to their quest games. Okay. All right, I'm gonna jump back. So when I'm done playing through whichever band you choose first, but in this example, the 2-3 band, I'm gonna click switch grades and then choose the next grade level band and click launch demo. It's going to bring you back to the dashboard. So think to yourself, what button do I have to click to get back to the student experience? That student experience button, right? That purple one there at the bottom. It's going to bring you back into the game world. It takes a second to load, and you can see this one does look very different than the other ones. Okay, so just click continue once you get here. And then there's lots to click on. So if you want to explore, you can. But in order to get to the games, you click this little swirly icon here, and it brings up the quest games. They want you guys to play Director's Cut. Okay, so you'll play on that game, play through it. As you're playing the games in each of the bands, I want you to get several wrong in a row to see how the game will scaffold you. Okay. And then get several right to see, once you get a lot right in a row, how it kind of takes away those supports for you. All right. So I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to play through the games. So let's say 9:40, we're going to come back together. Okay. So go ahead and play. If you have questions, you can ask me in the chat as you go. Otherwise, have fun. And if you don't have the demo, let me know. All right, it's 9:41, so I'm going to pull you guys back. I do want to ask you if you had any thoughts or questions. Did you enjoy the games? As you're thinking about that, I did get a question in the chat. So if my 5th graders are way below grade level, will it take them to K1 or 2-3 experience or keep them in the 4-5? And so they stay in their appropriate game world. So it'll still look like the 4th and 5th grade world, but they'll get that practice that they need below grade level. So especially in grades 4 and 5, it gives them grade level material alongside the skills that they need support with. So they still will get some stuff that's challenging for them if they're below grade level, but they're also going to get that skill practice below grade. Shonda says the games are wonderful. Good. Glad to hear that. Any thoughts on the scaffolding, like when you were playing the games and were getting wrong, a lot wrong in a row? Did you notice anything that the games did to kind of help you? You can say it in the chat or come off mute.
Unmasked was really cool how it like boxed the 2 options. And then also like the passage got a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
So it was only like 1 sentence versus 2 sentences of what they were identifying with the pronoun.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelsey. Another one I like about Unmask That is that even that visual connection between the noun and pronoun, so it like draws the line, and you guys are using CKLA, so I think that piece is in CKLA as well. So like just getting them to recognize that like this is replacing this, right? And that can be really helpful for kiddos too. Awesome. Well, I did want to show you this video. As you guys were working, I pulled up my my initial training deck, and I wanted to show you this adaptivity video that I typically show in the initial training because I think it'll kind of highlight how the game adapts. Jody says, how do the students log in? Can they get in through Clever? So do any of you know that answer? If you guys have Clever, they should be able to get in through Clever, but I don't want to just assume that. I see some head nods, so I think that that's the case. Yeah. Addison says yes. All right, so hold on one. Oh, sorry about that. Here we go. All right, so let me unplug my headphones so that you guys can hear it. Okay, so if you can hear it, just give me a thumbs up once I play the video. And again, this is talking about kind of the adaptivity within Amplify Reading.
Amplify Reading structure allows for pinpoint adaptivity. So here's an example quest for a kindergartner. This student is being asked to practice decoding BC, CVC words and words with blends containing the letters you see here, isolating the initial sounds of words, sorting words by category with picture support. Let's see how the student performs. So this student struggled to decode these words. So we're going to take a step back in the next quest and give them the same letters and words without blends. But they were able to isolate the initial sounds of words. So let's have them now move on to isolating the final sounds of words. And they completed this vocabulary activity. So let's see if we can find one of those words in an e-reader text or practice transferring some phonological awareness skills in that text as well. So this is what the student is working on in their second quest. Let's see how they did this time. Great. They were able to master that precursor early decoding activity. So let's have them retry the one that they found challenging in the next quest. Our data shows that most students are able to master that challenging content the second time around because of how we've adapted to their needs. They were able to isolate those final sounds. Let's have them segment phonemes in a different game. And they did a great job in the e-reader. So let's have them practice a comprehension process. There are a number of things to take note of here. You'll notice how this kindergartner is working on skills in multiple skill areas in tandem. We know how important that is from the science of reading. When they struggled with a particular skill, we gave them the scaffolding they needed to later be successful, and we didn't stop them from progressing in other areas. And finally, we ensured that students encountered the challenging content again in the program. Many other programs require teacher intervention at this point and don't actually account for whether or not that intervention was completed. Amplify Reading makes sure we always know what students need, both in terms of remediation and advancement.
All right, does that help kind of show how it adapts? All right, I see some head nods on there, so hopefully that was helpful. Any other questions you guys have that you can kind of think through, or anything that you saw in the games or anything like that? Oh, yeah, and so Sarah says they can also log in right through NC Ed Cloud. Should be available in there as well. All right, so for those of you that don't have data, if you want, when I give the group time to work on their data analysis, you can just keep playing the games. If that's something that's interesting to you, you can do that. Or I'll show you in a minute another resource that we have within the dashboard that, especially for you guys that support classroom teachers or pull small groups or anything like that, might be really helpful for you. So I'll show you that resource as well. And now we are on small groups. So we're going to talk about that piece in terms of pulling students in small groups. So this is on page 7 in your participant notebook. We're going to examine individual student performance for one of the skill domains. Okay, so here is my sample data here. And I want to determine the skill domain that I should focus on first. So I want to look more closely at early decoding. So when we look at early decoding here, I can see that I have 3 students with trouble spots. I do want to point out that even though Levi is on grade level, he still has a trouble spot. And that's really important because I love when students that are on grade level or above grade level are still challenged and still supported, even though they're performing, right? And so this program does a really good job of that. So even when we have kiddos that are above grade level, they're going to see challenging content. So they might have a trouble spot in your dashboard. So it's not a red flag. It's just saying like they're continuing to be pushed within the program, even though they're on grade level or above grade level, which is really cool. So you saw in my group that I had 3 kiddos with trouble spots in early decoding. So I've listed them here in my table. We're going to take a closer look at what we'll see in the dashboard. Okay, so when I click on Carter's name, so if I click on any student's name in the dashboard, it takes me to the student details summary. So if you want to do that in your own dashboard now, click on a student, it'll pull up this usage and growth tab first, but the one you see on my screen is the personalized path. Okay, so that's just the second tab there. When you click on personalized path, it brings up the domains that they're working on, their status within each of those domains, and then the sub skills that they're working on within those domains. Okay. So when I click on when I hover over early decoding, the orange color shows me that Carter is working below grade level, just like we saw in the skill view. When I see that cross-hatched box, it tells me that he has made unsuccessful attempts. Okay, so he's seen that content more than once. He has been unsuccessful with it. And if I hover over that orange box, so if you're in your actual dashboard and you hover over any of those boxes, it'll pull up the detailed view of those boxes. So I can see here that he completed decoding VC and CVC words and words with blends at the kindergarten level. But when I hover over the cross-hatched box, this pop-up appears and I see that he's struggling with reading irregularly spelled words. And then it even gives me examples like were, right? And so this is something that I want to record in my note catcher. Again, this is a kindergarten example, but the functionality of the dashboard works the same within yours. So you see here that I've recorded my notes on Carter based on the detail investigation that I've done into him, right? And so I would repeat this process for Ellie and Levi as well. So when I click again, I click on Ellie's name, I click on the personalized path tab, and then I can see what she's been working on so far. Again, I'm going to focus on that early decoding because I know she has a trouble spot there. I see the orange color. What does that mean again? Below grade level, right? And then the cross-hatched box indicates that she made those unsuccessful attempts here as well. So I hover over that cross-hatched box and that pop-up will appear. I can see that she's struggling with reading irregularly spelled words such as 1A and were, just like Carter, right? And so this is another thing. In this case, the sub skills that Carter and Ellie are struggling with are the same, but that's not often the case, right? So even though they're struggling in the same domain, there's a lot of different sub skills within that domain. So that's why it's important to go into the detailed summary and see which specific sub skills students are struggling with, because if you're going to support them in a small group, and they're not all struggling with irregularly spelled words, you want to be aware of that, right? So you can see that then I recorded the notes on Ellie in my table there. And then I would click on Levi's name and go through the same process on that personalized path, the early decoding. But I see here that he's not below grade level, right? He's working on grade level because I see that bluish green color. But I click on that crosshatched box and it shows me those details again. Excuse me. I see that he's struggling with decoding VC and CVC words and words with blends. And I can even see the specific letters that he's had difficulty with, right? So here I see these letters that he's struggling with. So then I would record that in my note catcher. So notice I do have 2 of them struggling with the same subskill, but Levi's not struggling with the same skill. Okay. Excuse me. And then we're gonna not go into that part right now. I'm gonna click here again, just to remind you how to get there once you're in your dashboard. So if you're still in the games, in order to get back to your dashboard, you have to click quit demo. Okay, so click quit demo. I see some recognition there. Sorry about that. If you weren't sure how to get back, quit demo and it'll bring you back to your dashboard. And then once you're there, click on students, click on skill view to get back to that colored tile piece. But then in order to pull up a student summary, detail summary, I just click on that student's name. It brings up these different tabs. I was looking at the personalized path tab here. And so that's where I want you guys to go. But first, before doing that, you need to identify which domain you're going to look at. And remember in my example, it was early decoding because I have these kiddos with trouble spots. Find one that you have a great area of need for your students and then kind of hone in on that area. Any questions about what you're doing? Okay, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go through and look at your data for that specific domain for that small group of students. Remember, this is on page 7 in your participant notebook. And those of you that don't have data, if you want to continue to play through the games, you can. Otherwise, you can explore the resource library. The resource library has a number of activities that are available to you based on the different domains and subskills. Okay. So when I click on resource library, it pulls up this table of contents on the left. I heard a lot of you in the beginning say your students are struggling with advanced decoding. So if that's the case at this point, I want you to go into advanced decoding, click on those students that are struggling, and then see which subskills they're actually struggling with by hovering over those little colored tiles in their personalized path. But if that's the case, you can come here and say you have several students struggling with multisyllabic decoding, click on that, and it'll pull up these different activities that you can do with them. So if you are a support person and you want to kind of dig into these resources, feel free to do that now as well.
Amber, on my 3 kids that I'm looking at for letter combinations, it has that it's their goal, but it has that they haven't started it yet, or it has like in progress. So there's no color on it yet. Do I still look at that as their focus skill, or do I look at a different sub-skill?
Yeah, I would choose a different one if they don't have any data on that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even though that one's like their lowest skill, it just means that the quest put them somewhere else.
So where did you see that it was their lowest skill? On the skill view?
Yeah.
And then when you went to,
yeah, on their skill view. So like they placed out of phonological awareness, placed out of letter sound correspondence, and then below grade for letter combinations.
but then when you click on like an individual student, go to personalized path, it doesn't have any information for letter combinations.
No, it just says like 0 out of 1, but there's no like colored box or anything yet.
Okay. So yeah, there might just not be enough data on it yet. So they placed when using their M-Class assessment data,
Right.
they place below, but they're not, they
Okay.
haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. All right, when you're ready to move on, if you can just put ready in the chat, please. I do see a question in the chat. So for 4th and 5th grade students, they don't have M-Class Dibbles data. The first time they log in, it'll automatically bring them to that placement tool. So they just go through that. It takes about 15 minutes, depending on their reading proficiency level. And then it'll place them based on the responses to that tool. The placement tool is just automatically comes up as the first activity if they don't have assessment data in there for them, Jenny. So it's not located anywhere. It's just the first thing that they see. And then how long should they be using per week? So our recommendation at Amplify is 40 to 60 minutes a week for 4th and 5th graders. And then for K3, we say to anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes a week. And those sessions typically are a little bit shorter, so 10 to 15-minute chunks. So I think some of you are 3rd grade teachers.
So is that like finishing one quest?
It really depends on how fast the student goes. So they're not like timed or anything. So they just go through. The recommendations in terms of timing, though, do take into account how much content is within a grade level for the year. And so if they log in that amount of time every week, they should get close or to the end of their narrative quest. So like that storyline. If they're logging in at home, which you guys do have, you can give them that option if you want to. Again, this is something we cover in initial training, but they can log in at home. And if they're logging in, you know, say 10 minutes, 15 minutes every night, they might get to the end of their narrative faster than obviously if they are just logging in at school. And so what happens then is they go into what's called a challenge mode. So it doesn't just stop them. They'll continue to play. It just won't look the same as it did during the school year. And then if you have kiddos that are advanced, if they're above grade level, they master all of their grade level content, it'll push them to the next grade level's content. Have a couple more questions here. Resource library looks pretty useful. The activities seem to have all resources readily available. Is that the case for all of them? So it should be the case. If in there, they should have, like, if you need specific resources, they're usually linked in there, or it tells you, like, if it's something that you should have in your classroom, it tells you what you need, and then you should be able to just pull it from your resources your physical resources. But they should be readily available. If not, you can email our team, help@amplify.com, and say, hey, I was looking at such and such activity in the resource library. It doesn't have blank. And then they can kind of help you out with that. How long will it take the students to complete the placement tool? It takes about 15 minutes, of course, depending on their reading proficiency. So 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depending. At the end of the placement tool, there's a little scientist who comes on the screen and says something like, great job, thanks for helping us fix our machine. And then that's where they know that it's the end. So if you want them to stop after the placement tool and then come back the next day, just say, hey, when the scientist tells you good job, like that's where you can stop for the day. Or if they don't stop, they'll just go right into their first quest and start playing. Jody, the placement tool should be the first thing that they do when they log into the program. So you don't have to set that up or anything. If there's no M-Class Dibbles data, like there wouldn't be for 4th and 5th grade, that'll be the first thing that they experience when they log in. Good questions, you guys. All right. Couple more things on my end here. So on page 8 in your participant notebook, I do want to say too, like we've kind of gone through the data analysis piece here. I know some of you don't have data. Some of you are just trying to wrap your head around what Amplify Reading is. That participant notebook is obviously yours, right? And so in a month or 2 months, when you have kiddos that have data, you can go back in and do this process that we talked through today. Use that participant notebook to kind of help guide you through thinking through that data in order to make some instructional decisions. On page 8, there is an optional piece, and this is just reiterating the fact that you have additional data. You're not just looking at Amplify Reading, right? You have your M-Class data, you have, I'm sure, maybe CKLA assessment data, you have data that you're using just by observing your students in small groups, right? So taking all of that into account, it might not make sense to just pull small groups based on your Amplify Reading data, right? So if that's the case, you could form small groups using a compilation of data, right? So it might make most sense to use your Amplify Reading data if that works for your kiddos, right? So it just kind of depends. You guys are the pros. You know how to best meet the needs of your kiddos. We're just trying to give you a data analysis tool to help you think through that data that you're getting from Amplify Reading, knowing that you have other data as well, right? So it could be a step that's useful. It could not. This is just an optional piece that you can use if it's going to help you. So whether or not you complete that optional second question for small groups, you should complete the reflection questions that lead you to next steps. So you can see here, the first question there is, what surprised you with this data? So as you're going through your data, are there pieces that you're surprised about? Since you're about 2 months into the school year, or almost 2 months into the school year, you probably are still learning a lot about your students, right? And so you might be surprised by some of it, you might not. In my example, my sample data, it did surprise me that Levi has a trouble spot for early decoding, because this is something that he is doing okay in class, but I want to make sure that I'm tracking this so he doesn't fall behind in his reading, right? And then this comparison piece. So how does this compare with the other data that you have collected on your students? So thinking through that as well. Kelsey, you're awesome. Thanks for putting those links in there. Just as my example, sorry. My example here, and other data I've collected, Levi is performing at a first grade level. So that is consistent, pretty consistent with what I saw in Amplify Reading. He did have a couple below grade levels, like that early decoding piece. That was a little bit surprising to me. And then the data on Carter and Ellie is consistent with other assessment measures that I have in my classroom. So that makes sense to me. And then what will your next steps be? So I'm thinking about adding Levi to a small group working on VC and CVC words. I know these are kind of early skills, but it sounds like some of you are still dealing with some of these foundational skills for your 4th and 5th graders even. And especially after the last year and a half that they've all had, right? It's been kind of crazy. And then also work with Carter and Ellie on decoding irregularly spelled words. And I had an idea to send flashcards home with them to practice these words. Okay, so just an example of what my next steps would be based on the sample data that we looked at. Okay, so we're not going to take time to go through this piece, but you do have this in your participant notebooks as well. Just thinking through one skill and kind of fleshing out what this looks like in your small group, any identified patterns or trouble spots, and then how you might move forward. Okay. All right. So as you were looking at your data, some of you, you may have wanted to know more about individual students' performance. And so we're not going to go through this piece, but I want you to be aware of it, that it is in your participant notebook. You don't do this for every student, right? On page 9, you have this information here. This is something that if you had a kiddo that was really surprising or had a very low spot, I know, I can't remember who said it, but they're like, I think Jody said, I have a 5th grader that's really below grade level. This is probably someone who you want to dig really deep into their data analysis and see how you can support them, which I'm sure you've already done in most cases, right? But this is just kind of a helpful piece. So identify that student, the skill domains that they're working on, any trouble spots they have. And then for those trouble spots, list the content that they've mastered and the content that they haven't mastered. I want to go back to the dashboard and show you the trouble spots tab, because I think that will help highlight where you're going to get this information. So again, I'm in my demo dashboard, but you guys will be in your actual dashboard on the students tab. And then click on a student. It brings up their detailed summary there. This last tab is the trouble spots tab. Okay. If they have a trouble spot, it'll show up here. The other nice thing is if they've worked through a trouble spot and they've actually mastered that skill, it will still be on this tab. It'll just, I think it says like mastered or something here for status. Okay. So you know that that's growth that they've made through the school year. Okay. It stays on the trouble spots tab, but it changes that status there. But when I come to this tab, I see specifically the game that the student struggled with, the skill that they struggled with, and even, more detail into that skill. So I can see the specific letters that Levi's struggling with for those VC and CVC words. Okay. And then this is where these instructional activities will be suggested for the student if they have trouble spots. You can see I have 19 instructional activities that are listed here to support Levi with these skills. Okay. So I can pull from this activity bank here and see if you guys didn't have a chance, if you were looking at your data, this is an example of what an instructional activity would look like. So Jody was referring to the materials, like this one says board to write on. We assume that you have that in your classroom, right? So that wouldn't be like provided to you. You would just pull that, but it gives you anything you need to prepare, and then how you would model the skill, and then how the students would practice. So they follow pretty much a I do, we do, you do model, where you're going to support the kiddos. And then most of them, not all of them, but most of them have this additional piece on the side. So if I'm going through this activity with my students and they're still struggling, this is how I could support them. If I'm going through it and they're doing really well, this is how I might challenge them with this skill. Okay, so I really like these pieces because it kind of gives you you're getting that feedback from your students and you can give them immediate feedback to continue their learning. Okay, so again, you can find those recommended instructional activities on the student tab. But if you know from your skill view, you know that you have students that are struggling with advanced decoding and you just want to go into the resource library, you can just click on resource library and it'll pull up that table of contents. You can pull from there too. Okay, so a couple of ways to access those resources. Any questions on the activities? Couple more things for you guys, just because you didn't have that initial training. Let's see. Yeah, Jenny says good amount of resources. Yeah, absolutely. And they are adding on a rolling basis. So there could be more added this school year. If there's one that you're really working on with a group of students and you've exhausted all of the activities in there, again, you can email our team, help@amplify.com, and just say like, oh, I've done all the activities for advanced decoding. They're really great, but I need more, right? And so they can help you out with that. So I pointed out the informational buttons that you can hover over. If you want to get kind of a refresher or maybe a thorough tour all in one sitting, you can click this tour button and we have a video here that will walk you through the dashboard. So you can watch that to get more detailed information there. The class settings tab is, so your students will log in through Clever or NC Ed Cloud. So they shouldn't need like a username or the QR code or anything, but these are here if for some reason that stuff is down and you would need to have them log in. Okay. But then we do have the practice mode. If you, again, remember that tab with the 3 dots, if you wanted to turn that on for students, you can turn that on in the class settings tab. And if you have any kiddos that would need Spanish voiceover for the directions within the games, you can turn that on as well. So again, they will still get the English games. They'll English letter sounds, English words, etc. But the directions would be read to them in Spanish. So that might be helpful for some of your students if they need that native language support. So you can turn that on there. And we all want to be on the same page, right? And including our caregivers and our parents at home. So we do have a caregiver report that gives them kind of an overview of what their child is working on in Amplify Reading. So I know you guys have a letter that you maybe send from M-Class. Do you guys send your M-Class letters home? Okay, so this is an additional piece. This is just going to cover what's in Amplify Reading. And in my demo, I can't click on these, but if you wanted to download for the entire class, you can just click here and it'll pull up a PDF of all of your students in English or Espanol or both, whichever you need. But I'm going to show you within the student tab. When I click on students, click on a particular student, and then here is where the caregiver report is as well. So in your actual dashboard, you'll be able to download them from the class settings tab, but I'll click here and show you an example of what that looks like. So I just downloaded just specifically for Levi. You can see here his usage, his progression through the year. So the skills that he's working on and how much he's completed this school year. And then this will show which quest he's working on, as well as the activities in the quest and the skills that he's been practicing. Okay, so just a way to give parents and caregivers insight into their child's performance at school. And then you see listed here, amplify.com/caregiver hub reading. And so this is our caregiver hub, right? So I'm going to open this for you. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oops. In my initial deck, I have it linked, but here, caregiver. So if you choose to give students access at home, I definitely suggest having your parents and caregivers go to this site. They don't need to log in or anything, but it gives them information about what Amplify Reading is, how they can help their child access it at home. Since you guys are working with 3rd through 5th graders, not as necessary, I'm sure, as the early grades for parents to help them log in at home, but some might need it, right? And so it gives them, again, an overview. What is Amplify Reading? Has a short video kind of giving an example of some of the games. What is my role? And I know I get this a lot from districts like, oh, when we were remote, we had parents just like do the work for the kids. And so we don't want to give them access. But this talks to them about like, your job is really to make sure that they can log in independently, but then you need to give them that time and space to play on their own. We want to know what your child can do, not what you can do, right? And then I really like these pieces. So we have some coloring pages that they can print off if they want to, like some different curiosos. And then we have e-reader text linked here. So parents and caregivers can actually access these texts and read them at home with their child or children. And these are texts that the students are going to access in Amplify Reading. So they'll see them. So it's kind of front loading them and giving them some practice at home with their parents and caregivers, especially if they don't have a lot of resources at home. This is great for them to have access to. And then if they need any help while the child's working at home, they can access these support pieces here. Any questions on any of that? All right, so the last piece I want to show you in the Amplify Reading dashboard is the teacher guide. Okay, so this is listed across the top, teacher guide. What this is a wealth of knowledge for you if you have questions as you continue to use the program. You can come here, you can search your question in the search bar, or you can look at our table of contents. We do have some FAQs here that might be interesting for you to check out. We also have, getting started. What does this look like? What's the login introduction piece? Okay, those are available as well. And then this is kind of talking about the app adaptive piece and what the experience is like for students. Okay, so we have a number of resources there for you as educators if you're interested in checking those out. And then you guys probably know this because you are using all things Amplify, right? You have M-Class, you have CKLA, you have Amplify Reading, but this live chat button is helpful if you have quick questions that you need answered. Click on that orange live chat in your dashboard, and there will be someone there that is waiting to have a conversation with you and answer your questions. So very helpful if you have specific questions. So I hope that was clear as we went through. I appreciate you guys kind of giving me some feedback in terms of what your needs were in terms of the training. We didn't go through all of the data analysis pieces. That last one is just the individual student. So you do have questions in your participant notebook that will lead you through that if you're interested in checking out those resources once you have more data on your students within Amplify Reading. Okay. And then I do want to show you. This is helpful. So the root cause analysis, once you've analyzed your data and you've prioritized your next steps, this piece is really thinking about what might be the reason for the lack of or I would say the areas of need that you're seeing in your data in Amplify Reading. Okay, so there's just some questions here that guide you to think about what might be causing these areas of need, right? These gaps that your students are having. Okay. And then these are the questions that you should answer as you analyze your data and prioritize your next steps. Okay. This section takes about 10 minutes depending on where you're at in the process. But just thinking through the pieces that we've kind of talked about, right? Which skills are your students doing well in? Well in? What can you attribute this to? So thinking through those root causes, and then what are your next steps? Excuse me. So we've talked about these resources. I showed you guys the resource library that you have access to. Those are definitely activities that you want to check out. Obviously optional, not required unless the district tells you that, but those are just available to you to support you as you work with your students. And then I showed you all of these resources here. Let's see. This is just walking you through a sample lesson. All right, I think we're good on the presentation here. Again, it's been such a pleasure working with you guys this morning. I'm excited for you to dig in the program now that you know more about what's going on. I am going to give you a survey. I really appreciate you taking the time to fill it out. I'm actually going to give you the initial training session survey because we did talk a lot about those points. So give me 1 second here. You guys are so welcome. I'm glad that this has been helpful. Awesome, Jeff. Love that. How you can support your teachers you work with. You guys are great. Okay, so let me pull this up for you. It's just a link to a SurveyMonkey. Again, if you have a couple minutes to fill it out, I'd really appreciate it. And really thinking through just about the training that I gave you today. I know there's a lot of logistical pieces that are out of my control, out of your control, but thinking through the information that I provided to you as you're filling out that survey, that would be great. You guys are so welcome.